Hey guys, Mr. Ree here, and if you've watched my recent videos, I have been talking a lot about what I think might be the next class coming to Darktide, which is of course the Hive Ganger. If you haven't checked out those videos, my first one, which did pretty well honestly, seems like you guys were enjoying it, was all about my logic behind why I think this might be the class coming based on the very slight bits of information that we have and tying that in with certain other anecdotal pieces of evidence. And then I did another video with Joe Plays Games where we explored the sort of lore implications and the lore connectivity that bringing a class like the Hive Ganger, which is basically just like an Underhive gang member, into the fold would entail, and also where that could take the plot from here. And I think that honestly made a lot of sense once we hashed it out. So when I'm talking today about the Ganger further, don't take that as me saying it's for sure the Ganger, but I'm feeling pretty dang confident about my choice of locking in on this here. I know that I did tease that I know, or that I've somehow discovered the truth. Who's to say what's the truth, right? I couldn't even tell you if I did, but certainly we had some fun trolling Joe. So go check that out if you want to see her get the class revealed to her in a fun sort of way, or quote unquote revealed to her. Now, about today's video, what I want to do is I want to talk about two things. First of all, I want to respond to your comments and your opinions about this class and my evidencing of it, your takes on that. And then I want to dive into what this class might be looking like if it is in fact realized in Darktide. What will they do with it? What sort of weapons and abilities will it have? And obviously we'll do this again when we have the teaser and we know more about the class and we can see more stuff and really have something to sink our teeth into. But I want to get some ideas out here to sort of get those juices flowing, and perhaps even be able to call some stuff really ahead of time, because Fatshark, if they're pulling for this class, then they're pulling it from somewhere, and I think I've got the source materials for that. So let's go ahead and first start with just talking about what you guys reacted to my investigative journalism, or whatever you'd call it, with. It was generally two reactions. One of them that I very much was eager or excited to see was that you guys generally seemed to agree with me. You thought that my evidencing of my argument was pretty sound, you followed it, and you agreed. And yeah, it seemed like, I kind of tried my best to have a logical deduction. There's not much information to go on, but I think I followed it where it leads as best I could. And yeah, I might be off a little bit. There's a chance it could be Rogue Trader or something that's kind of adjacent to a gang in some sort of way, but I think I'm pretty close to the mark with this at any rate. The second thing that I was not so excited to see, but it gives me something to talk about here today, is that a lot of people didn't seem to be super excited about the prospect of a Ganger coming to Darktide. And this is something I actually kind of was sympathetic, but also a little bit perplexed by. The reason I say I'm sympathetic is because obviously Ganger was not my first choice for the next class to come to Darktide. If you watched my video from a couple months ago, my first choice is absolutely admech. And yo, what's up? 07's in the chat for all my admech homies. Admech is by far one of the coolest sort of factions and things to explore within the whole 40k genre for me, at least from the Mortals side or the Mortal adjacent side, something that could logically appear in the game. And I think it's very realistic that it could be tied into the game based on lore, based on the sort of power level that we're at. And I really want it to be admech, but when I'm looking at the information that I'm seeing in front of me, or I'm looking at where the story is and what it might imply about what we might be getting in the future, I couldn't in all good conscience justify that it is admech. I just don't think there's anything pointing to that. So I had to be honest with myself and say, yeah, it's just not going to be admech this time. I could be I could be wrong. I could be just completely off base and that it is admech. But yeah, I feel like that is probably out, as well as things like Sister of Battle. I'm just seeing no signs pointing towards that at all. But the other part of that is I think that people are frustrated and they're disappointed that they're not getting their favorite thing in the game, if it is indeed Ganger, because I don't think there's many people that were pulling for this, but I don't want that to be a downside, because let's put it this way. When Arbites came out, how many of you, sign off in the comments, I don't think there'll be anybody, but be truthful, were any of you saying, oh, the first class they add to Darktide, I want it to be Arbites. I didn't even know what a fucking Arbites was until they announced it for Darktide, right? I was like, oh, it's like a cop. It's like Judge Dredd, basically. It's literally just that. Yeah, but like everyone was excited for that to be added because, of course, it was novel. Like getting a new class for Darktide at all was so huge that we literally didn't care. It was like, holy shit, just give it to us. Like, I'll buy it because like playing something new in this game was something that I think a lot of us were not anticipating to ever happen at all. So that blew our minds. And then once that was on the table that yes, they can make more classes and they will be making more classes, then the expectation was set that, oh, well, they should be just doing whatever my favorite thing is. And so whatever they make isn't going to please most people. And I have the firm belief that, like, you know, if they could, or if they were ready to make admech or whatever the most popular thing is, I feel like based on my comments, it seems like most people really want Adeptus Mechanicus, then they would do that, right? So maybe they're not ready for it. Maybe like it's a sort of a thing with Games Workshop, because you know Games Workshop is like very precious about entities like their properties like that. So they might just have to get their papers signed before they can work on it. Or maybe it's like right around the corner. Who knows? I mean, maybe literally 6 months from now, we'll have Adeptus Mechanicus and it was just a little bit more complex than this and they push it out first. Who's to say, right? But I have full faith that like they're not going to release something that is bad and uninteresting, like just to release something, right? They are creatives. They release things that they think are good. And if you thought that Arbites was good and, you know, like cool, then I think we can at least expect something to that standard, if not more, because they've probably had more time to work on this and they've learned from what they did with Arbites. And they've learned from like how the game has evolved. So every time they release a map, it's a better map. Like the newer maps are always better than the older maps. And I feel like these new characters and new talent trees have always been better than the older ones. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about it from that extent. And that's where I want to shift over to the second part of the video today, which is to try to make the case to you that this can be really fucking cool if they do it right. And if they're pulling from the source material that I think they're pulling from, there's a lot of stuff here that they could make very cool and like try to make this class unique. Because that is the thing we're going to run into is like, okay, for Adeptus Mechanicus, it was an easy argument to make from my perspective because it was like, okay, this is so different than anything we have in the game right now. But something like a Ganger tends to like make you think that it might have a lot of overlap with the weapons and utilities that we already have. Like how different could they really make them? But I think they really can make them different. So let's dive in, and the source material that I think they almost certainly have to be pulling from here, because of course nothing is new in 40k, is got to be Necromunda, right? So we're going to be taking a dive into Necromunda and what Necromunda is, and sort of the gangs and gangers in that. Before I do, reminder, if you enjoy this sort of content, if you enjoy like exploring the 40k and what's coming to Darktide, subscribe, help support me, and maybe even become a member. We're about to have a members Discord, guys. How cool is that? And there's going to be a ton of fun stuff and you know, extra benefits I'll be able to provide once we have a cohesive Discord. But yeah, thank you guys so much. We're almost at 30,000. We should be hitting it pretty shortly. So holy fuck, right? Okay, now let's go on past that and let's talk about Necromunda. If you are unaware, which I think is probably a very scarce number of people, but Necromunda is a tabletop RPG setting that is set in a hive city in the 40k universe. So it takes place pretty much concurrently with what is going on in the Darktide universe. It's actually in the 41st millennium, and it is in a very similar setting, right? Hive cities, sort of by, you know, just generally having like billions, if not trillions of people confined in one little space that have little oversight from the government that is way up in the tops of the towers, generally tends to devolve into a bunch of criminal gangs just doing whatever they can and screwing each other over. And that's what Necromunda is all about. It is about the interplay between a ton of gangs. There's like at least 6 that are named within the Necromunda universe, and just battling between those gangs and fighting for territory, fighting for resources, and yeah, just arming yourself to the teeth and going about your your stuff. It's very cyberpunk-esque. And in fact, a lot of Necromunda's stylings are very much inspired because this is like an older sort of thing that I think it was probably printed in the 80s or 90s. It was very much inspired by punk aesthetics and futuristic aesthetics from that time period, from the 80s generally, because that's where like a lot of the writers grew up and stuff. So when we're talking about like the aesthetics and the gangs that you would see there, imagine the gangs from 80s films where they have like spiked mohawks and they are they're tough and they have like toothpicks and they have like piercings. That's the sort of gangs we're talking about here. So there is a lot of flavor to be had in the gangs, and that's where I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit deeper, because if Fatshark is pulling from this, and I think they must have to be pulling from this, when we look at their historical output, they are very, very faithful at pulling from source material, from pulling from miniatures. In fact, like the codexes more or less lay out the enemies that we face in the game, and even like sort of like the resistances and all that sort of stuff. Everything that's in the game is explained somewhere in a codex. And though Necromunda isn't in a codex, and though gangers aren't in any sort of codex, it's definitely got to be like, if they're doing gangers, they're pulling from this, because it is just so detailed and it gives you so much to work from. So I look through these houses, and there's a good number of houses to pick from. The houses generally, though, are quite specialized. So you have houses that are primarily just assassin focused, that are all dressed in like, basically like leather gimp suits, and they are just all assassins who employ like poisons and stealth and all that sort of stuff. And then you've also got tech adept sort of adjacent houses, and the houses are what they call gangs in that universe, or at least the major gangs. And these gangs are all about like, oh, they've got access, the rich kids, they've got access to like hyper advanced technology comparative to the other gangs. They might not be as fierce in number, but they've got the weapons and stuff to flex their power on the enemies. And of course, you've got like, the gang that's all about like physical prowess, called the Goliaths, I believe, and they've got heavy armor. So yeah, there's lots of different like gangs that are devoted to their specific things, but I think if Fatshark is going to pull from something here, they can't be too on the nose about it, right? Because Necromunda is an existing IP. Darktide is not Necromunda. They can't just say, hey, this is the Necromunda expansion for Darktide. They have to come up with their own thing. So they need to play it a little bit like vague, and I think they could just go with the general ganger aesthetic of like an 80s gang punk sort of thing. It would be a safe bet. And that leads me to think that they would probably be pulling from one of the houses that is a little bit more just like your typical gang, and that's House Escher. If you want to look it up, it's Escher. I'm going to put some of the miniatures on the screen here so you can check it out. This is just what I was able to find with some Google searching. But as we can see, the House Escher units, or whatever we call them, those affiliated with House Escher have a pretty distinct style, right? Very bold hair color choices and hairstyle choices, which makes me think that perhaps with this update, we will finally be getting those much sought after new hairstyles. It's something that's been sorely neglected for a very, very long time, since like, I don't think there's been any new hairstyles since the game has like come out, right? And adding new hair colors for you to be able to pink. I think this would be like at the bare minimum for helping players to roleplay and feel like a ganger, to feel like a punk, to feel like an outcast who is, because they really need to distinguish themselves from not just being the rejects who are also criminals, but these guys are like career criminals. Like they belong to a different subset. So I think it would help them stand out as a class if they had something very obviously aesthetically different. So like, makeup, hairstyle, piercings, spiked armor. You can see they typically dress in very bold colors. So I expect to see a lot of that in their aesthetics in the game, which would be very cool to if we had some of these like awesome, top knots and mohawks and whatever the hell you call these hairstyles. Like they're quite crazy. The second thing I want to point out here is that almost all of these models are dual wielding. Like they tend to have melee weapons and range weapons mixed together. There's this lady here with the whip, that she's the leader and has a whip and a crazy fucking hairdo. It looks like it's like feathers or something, but there's a whip, there's a plasma pistol, there is a chem thrower. And a lot of these weapons are already represented in the game, like chain swords and power swords. And then they've got them together with auto pistols and auto guns, which are weapons that are used a lot. There's even a flail over here. So all of these are weapons they could be pulling from for their exclusive weapons. If we go off the Arbites standard, then we might expect them to have 2 exclusive ranged weapons and 2 exclusive melee weapons, and then get a mix of other stuff in from other classes. But just seeing what we've got here, we can already expect they would probably have auto guns, almost certainly would have auto guns. They would probably have chain swords, because those exist tied to the minifigures that they're already selling, so it wouldn't be any stretch of the imagination to have them on here. And then like las pistols, and maybe the range weapon would be something like a plasma pistol or the chem thrower. Like that would be pretty damn sick. As far as like abilities and what they're gonna bring to the game and like what will set them apart, I think that is like the operative thing that we need to focus on, because that was a big concern for a lot of players in the chat. It's like, I just don't understand how it's going to be so boring. How are they going to be differentiated? They're just going to be a dude with a melee, or like they're going to be a range class. Veterans are already the range class. And I feel like if you approach it from that perspective, like a super reductionist perspective, then every class is literally just a dude with a melee weapon and a dude with a range weapon, right? Like if we reduce it all the way down like that. But it's in how they implement those weapons and what the weapons are and like what sort of powers they can bring to utilizing those weapons that they differentiate the classes. So like Zealot feels different than Veteran, because Zealot can use his abilities to like close the gap super fast and is like very resilient. I mean, Zealot's kind of like probably the most boring class right now, but you know, just looking at like how Arbites plays with something like the Shock Maul versus like the Veteran, right? The Arbites is just so in your fucking face and just always like CCing enemies. The Veteran is trying to keep that distance. Yeah, so there's like ways to differentiate this stuff. And as I've said before, I think their class design has gotten better over time. So I would anticipate that if they're going to put this class out, they're not going to be overlapping with anything we already have, which is actually a good way to sort of kind of figure out what the class might be bringing to the game, because we have so much stuff in the class already, right? We've got 5 classes with 3 abilities each, so that's 15 different abilities that we can draw from to say like, okay, we probably won't see this because we've already seen it a bunch. And the same thing goes with keystones and grenades. So I want to go through here as some process of elimination, and we can just sort of color in the negative space and figure out what might be going on with this class. And I'll lay out what they're not doing, and then I'll kind of give you some ideas as to what they might be doing that doesn't fit those. So I definitely don't think this class will have a charge ability, because we've already got Ogren, Arbites, and Zealot who have a charge ability. I don't think there will be a stealth ability, because there's already 2 classes, Zealot and Veteran, who have stealth, and it's not really a fun ability to be using in the game, even though there are a lot of ganger aesthetics or ganger types that are all about stealth and sneaking. I don't think there will be anything with like wall hacks for shooting, because we've already got that on Arbites and on Veteran. I don't think that this class will be primarily melee focused, because we have Zealot, Arbites, and Ogren who are almost entirely melee. Like they're like 75+% melee focused. And I think that's about it for general stuff that I want to say that won't be. But now let's start to talk about stuff that we don't have in the game. It's like a notable absence that's been in a Vermintide 2, like on their past games. Stuff that they have proven that they can do in the past, because that would be a guaranteed win for them, right? If they've got the mechanics to do something in that game, well, then they can just recreate it here. And the first thing that I think is very obvious that will be on this class is dual wielding of some sort. Because all of these miniatures, all of the gangers depicted here, almost without exception, are dual wielding in some way, shape, or form. There are some of them that are dual wielding melee weapons. There are some that are dual wielding one range, one melee, and there's some that are dual wielding melee or both ranged. So there is a good possibility that there's going to be weapon combinations as their exclusives. But I think what might be more interesting is if this class is the class that can differentiate itself by being able to equip certain weapons in each hand and equip them both at the same time. Now that they've proven like Arbites shield and shot pistol is a thing, it's like the first combined shield and range weapon. If this class can use certain light melee weapons and certain light range weapons at the same time, that would open up a world of possibilities for this class. And I'd have to imagine that there will also be the ability to like dual wield something like daggers, because we can see that in the pictures here, or dual wield shredder auto pistols. Everyone wants double shredder auto pistols, but like something more like auto guns would probably be like very, very impressive and fun. And I couldn't imagine a dev putting dual wielding in and not giving you the ability to dual wield what is it called, like the braced auto guns, right? Just be Rambo entirely. So the other thing that I have been missing from my Vermintide 2 days is long-ranged melee. And I went through a good long list of the weapons that they use in Necromunda in the tabletop setting, and there is a lot of crazy melee options in here, and some of them, including ones in the picture here, are melee that has a range to it. Currently in Darktide, there are... tell me in the comments if I'm missing anything, but there are no weapons that have a longer range than just like, you know, the typical. Some of them have like a little bit of reach, but like there's nothing like the billhook or the halberd from Vermintide 2, where you could hit enemies from farther away than they can hit you. So that would be very unique if this class has a bit of like distance keeping, where like they want to be in melee but not so close, so they can keep that distance from the enemies and kind of whittle them down. So spears are definitely on the table, because there's tons of spear adjacent things that are in this list of weapons they've got, and I'll also put the list of weapons here on the screen. Let's just go through and actually say some right now. So we've got the beak and talons, which sounds like it's like a two hands sort of thing with probably like a claws sort of thing. We've got the chainsword chain glaive, so like that's a long, Carillion had a glaive, right? So we could have a long pole with a chain weapon on the end. There is a chain cleaver. I wonder if that like has a range you can like throw the chain. I think a chain would be so thematic with this class, right? Like a ganger walking around with like some jangly chains, and they can like hook enemies and disable them. We've also got the lash whip, the lightning claw, just clubs, obviously open fists, a potential for just like brass knuckles as a weapon here. And then they've also got access to power swords and shock batons. So almost certainly they're going to be getting the shock maul, right? Because there's a lot of these that figure that. Stiletto knives, so they're going to have the combat knives, we'd have to assume. Thunderhammer, I kind of doubt they'll get the Thunderhammer. And it's okay if they don't, because that weapon I feel like kind of sucks anyway. But yeah, there's like lots of different stuff here that they could be using. And there's certainly weapons that are capable of having that long range melee capability, which I think would be pretty cool. Now, as far as class abilities, this is something that I'm 100% going to return to in the future, because I bet we'll get some teasers or some like tastes of that from our teaser trailer. The classes, or like the way that Necromunda is set up, the classes don't really have their specific abilities. There are like feats or sort of abilities that you can use, but none of them really stand out to me. But what I was thinking is like, what is stuff that we don't have in the game? As I said before, we don't have any class abilities that can immobilize enemies. We have like charges and taunts and stuff that can like, knock them down or stagger them temporarily, but we don't have anything that like sticks enemies in place except for shock mine or stun grenades. But if there was a ability that could like daze enemies or get them to trip or something like that, would be very useful, especially for the direction the game is going, giving them a team play ability that can help everybody in the team. There's also just a general lack of enemy disables in the game in general. Like, we've got smoke grenades for the veteran, we've got the shock mines, we've got stun grenades, but there's very few things that any specific class can do that will give an extended disability to enemies, so that like, except for suppression from like, flame effects or shooting. There's also no berserking abilities. So we have like, Slayer Barden from Vermintide 2. There's no berserking two-handed weapon or like dual-wielding weapons. Makes me think there's got to be like some sort of like melee archetype here. And there's no berserking that's not tied to a charge ability. So like if they're going to do berserking, I wonder if they'll make it differentiate that somehow, so that it's not like, oh, I'm charging and I'm attacking really fast, exactly like Zealot's charge. The other things that they seem to be really themed about when we're looking through all the rule books is lots of stuff with poisons and subterfuge. We've had the same bleeds and flames since the beginning of the game. I don't know if they'll bring in another damage over time ability like poison, but I could see a way that they could differentiate it, right? Poisons perhaps could be a damage over time effect that they could apply with their weapons or something. Like they've got the chem thrower, right? That could throw this poison on enemies that maybe perhaps slows them down or even gives them a damage over time effect that is permanent in the sense of Acrid from Risky Rain 2. He has a poison where once you apply it to enemies, it will take them all the way down to 1 HP, but it won't kill them. And then you just have to kind of like, bide your time. So perhaps something like that just differentiates it from other damage over time effects. We also don't have any grenades that are remote detonation. We don't have any real traps. We have exactly one, the shock mine that you can place ahead of time and then enemies can stumble into it, but we don't have any that you decide when to trigger other than just throwing it at that exact moment. So it would be very cool if like this class can bait in enemies, keep the distance from them, and have a trap already set and trigger it at the exact perfect time to get that target or get those targets that you really want to. They do have some traps, and they actually have a whole set for booby traps in their game files or in their descriptions. They have things like the gas trap, the melta trap, the frag trap. As far as grenades in general, they have demolition charges, so there could be just like a straight satchel charge that you can use. They have choke gas grenades. There's obviously stuff on here like incendiary grenades, cracks, crack grenades, not crack, and what else? They've got plenty of stuff on here that is already explored in the game, smoke grenades, right? But the things that they have that are unique are like scare grass grenades that make enemies run away. It like affects their mind. And they've got flashbangs, which I guess we kind of already have that. So I imagine they'll probably have one sort of direct impact grenade, but they need to do something to differentiate that from what we've already got with the literal direct impact grenade of the RBDs, and then of course the shredders on the veteran. So they'll have to kind of make that a little bit more flavorful, which makes me think that they'll probably have at least one that's like a satchel charge or a trap you can lay down. Now, speaking of like traps and explosives, we also don't have any ultimate abilities in the game, or abilities, whatever you want to call them, that are direct damage, except for the Psyker, who has the ability to apply 6 stacks of Soul Blaze with Venting Shriek. But there's no other abilities that on their own are a big damage dealer. So I could see a reality in which this class can throw down a couple of like booby traps, or like a couple of some caltrops or something that like enemies have to now walk through and take damage and get bleeds. Just be a crowd control sort of area denial ultimate ability. And you obviously wouldn't want to make it too powerful, but yeah, you could reach a balance there and just be like a direct damaging ultimate, which is something we haven't explored yet. They also don't have any resource generation in classes except for the veteran. And this is a very fine line to walk, because the veteran, they have nerfed survivalist, the ability to print ammo multiple times, because it just is kind of like imbalanced, the ability to have infinite ammo. But there's lots of other resources in the game that we don't have in great quantities. Such as grenades, such as stims. And if you had a class that was able to produce extra of those for your team, it would be a very, very useful thing. And it would allow you to play in different ways. It would open up different avenues for playstyles. And so I think maybe, I thought this might be coming with the RBDs, with like the dog, like digging them up or something. But yeah, maybe like because these are, gangers, maybe they have a better chance at like opening containers and finding stuff in there. So like they're the looters who are going around and like, they get extra grenades, or like they get some sort of like resource boost for the team by looting stuff up. So that could be really, really cool and pretty fun to be a ganger for that purpose. And speaking of stims, I think I mentioned stims in there. Stims in general are very underused in this game, I feel like. I think for many players, stims are just something that sits in your inventory for the entirety of the game. Like you just get it, you pick it up, and then you finish the game with it because you're waiting for that moment to pop it, because they're scarce, right? Well, if this class can somehow like print stims, or gets extra effects from stims, or like maybe the stim effect that the stim that you're holding provides an effect when you activate your ultimate, an additional one or something, that could provide an additional use for these in the game, where I think they are currently very underused. And it's also incredibly on theme. There's a ton of stuff in their lore documents or in their design, what do they call it, in the rules about stim usage and about what the different stims do in combat. So like stims plus gangers is kind of a match made in heaven. I would be incredibly surprised if there wasn't something in there with that, especially because right now in the game, there is an event that is currently going on. And one of the conditions of the event, I believe it's if you side with collecting the rations, then the next day, everybody gets a buff to what their stims do. So for instance, I think consuming yellow, injecting yourself with a yellow stim makes it so your dodge is much longer and comes out quicker. And then if you inject a blue stim, you have boosted attack speed for the rest of the game. Red is like something else, I don't know. But like, yeah, you get different benefits permanently for the whole duration of the game based on the stim you use. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is them testing to see how imbalanced that makes it. Which makes me think that, hey, if they're testing that, what about the other thing that happens when you side with destroying the rations, which is you get double ammo in your reserves and your weapons get bonus penetration, they get bonus cleave. So it takes weapons that are generally kind of poo-poo dog shit, like the braced auto guns, and makes them actually usable, because now you have a huge quantity of ammo to blast through, and you can hit multiple targets with bullets that would normally be ineffective. Now for weapons that are already OP, like the plasma gun that really don't run out of ammo and already have plenty of cleave, it's not a buff. But for weapons like, like those weaker weapons like Shred or Auto Pistol, it's a huge buff. So perhaps this is something that they're testing to see if the Ganger brings this to the team, if like this is something that the Ganger gets. Does it break the game? Does it like enable them to make the game like, just too easy because these weapons are like, hidden OP and that's all they needed? I think that it doesn't really make anything OP, but it makes a lot of weapons kind of viable. And it makes sense to me if like a lot of the images that we're seeing here are focused around having these auto guns and a lot of weapons like Shred or Auto Pistols that are generally kind of lower down on the tier list. If that's like primarily the weapons that we are, like a good portion of the weapons that we get, they know those weapons suck, right? They have to see the play rates. But if this class gets special boosts to them and can use them alongside melee weapons, like dual wielding a Shred or Auto Pistol plus a dueling sword or whatever, I think you would see a massive uptick in the amount of play. And this might be a class that can play with different weapons that other classes can play with entirely. And speaking of how the class plays, let's talk about like, what sort of playstyle we'd be expecting. I already said that I don't think it's going to be primary melee. I also think it's hard to define a class by being a primary range class. I mean, we've already got the veteran, but like shooting isn't as characterizing in general as melee, right? When you get into melee as the Arbites or the Ogryn, you feel entirely different than when you're in melee with the Zealot. One is very fast, agile, shooting for weak spots. One is just literally sweeping his shield from left to right and clubbing everything that's in front of him. So like that is very defining of the playstyle. But when you switch to range, every character shoots the guns the same way, effectively. So I don't think they want to make them like purely a range class or like a range focus class. But what I do think would be really cool is if this class is a melee and ranged weaver. Like they can switch back and forth very fluidly. And based on what we're seeing in the models and sort of the way that the loadouts work in Necromunda, it seems like they definitely do have a ranged hybrid sort of approach to combat, which makes me think that maybe this class would be exceptionally mobile. Now, right now, we have one class whose sort of defining thing is mobility, but he's mobility on offense and melee prowess. That's the Zealot, right? If you had a ranged mobile class that their goal is to keep that distance, to keep that slight gap of separation. Like they might have short to medium range weapons, but they also have extra skills and abilities to stall out enemies and to kite them backwards and gun them down, and then approach and like engage when the time is right. So making them a mobile shooter would make them very different than the veteran, who's more of an in-placed shooter a lot of times. And I'm thinking that like this class could have extra mobility skills because these are Hive denizens. They're very comfortable in these environments. It would make a lot of sense if they get the ability to move very fluidly, such as vaulting over low obstacles, or even in the rulebook, there is grappling. I think that would be mechanically very difficult because like shit, like you could grapple to some crazy place and break the game, but like being able to traverse the environments very easily. And one other idea that came from this is, when you get stuck into melee, it's pretty hard to get out of melee for most classes, right? The zealot can turn around and run, but a lot of times you get hit in the back. What if this is the first class that actually has a dedicated disengage, like being able to do a reverse charge, right? When you charge in with hold the line with the Arbites, you switch from whatever weapon you have, you're shooting in ranged, you charge and you pull out your melee, and then you get a steroid for attack damage for melee damage for the next 6 seconds or whatever it is. If this is reverse hold the line and you're in melee, but you want to get that distance, you disengage, you jump backwards, you pocket stand the enemies in front of you, and you pull out your ranged weapons and you get a ranged attack speed steroid, and you just go to town on them. You just basically point blank barrage, literally like a better version of point blank barrage, and go down on them. The other ideas, and this will just about wrap it up, only other ideas I've been able to come up with so far are the idea of decoys, which are in the rulebooks. Decoys could serve as a stealth sort of stand-in, because I think that they will probably not give this class stealth directly, since stealth is very easily abused, but they could give a decoy, like a hologram decoy or something like that, that can draw enemies' attention and draw fire, and this could be a pseudo-stealth, right? You can still be attacked. You can still have new enemies that come on the scene notice you instead of the decoy, but this would be a way of approaching in a clandestine or in a way without just having to tank bullets to the face that would be much more appropriate for their sort of skill set. And those are the ideas I have so far, guys. So hopefully, with all this laid on the table and some images and some depictions, and this can all sort of turn around your head, hopefully I'm laying out an argument that I think if we are getting Ganger, this could be pretty dang cool, right? And I have faith that whatever they make, it is going to be pretty cool. They are creatives after all, as I said before. I think you're not going to put anything but your best foot forward, and there's a reason why they're choosing to do this one now instead of something that has been much more demanded, like the admech. It's because they think this one is good and it's ready and people are going to like it. So I hope we do like it. And this isn't the only content I'm going to make. I think I might explore some other options just to kind of play the field, so to speak, because maybe it isn't Ganger. Maybe I want to explore other potential options that it could be and what those could bring to the game as well. And we'll know in a very short amount of time anyway. Only about 10 days to go, guys. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet. And I've been Mr. E, I guess. Okay. Bye-bye.